Hi, I'm Mark Reed. Follow me as I attempt to put my new book, Impact Culture, into practice and discuss it with others taking a similar journey. You'll get tips that will help you achieve more impact from your research and stay healthy, no matter how busy you are. Rediscover your purpose. Lead from behind to empower those around you. Transform your work culture. Welcome to Season 4 of the Fast Track Impact Podcast. Great, so today we are thinking about impact strategies. This idea that we can, in theory, make a plan from the top of a university that might enable us all to achieve more impact. Well, what is an impact strategy? Is this just this thing that sits on a shelf that some Pro-Vice Chancellor comes up with to create a legacy that nobody will ever read and will never affect anyone? Or is this, in theory, something that might, in fact, enable us to achieve more impact? So I'm going to be talking to three guests today on the podcast. I will be talking to Saskia Gent, who is Director of Insights for Impact, about a paper that we co-authored with a number of colleagues, trying to understand the kinds of impact strategies that are out there already, and what might be a good impact strategy, and how might you develop an effective impact strategy that can actually change how people really do impact and enable us to do more and better impact. But this journey actually started when I was contacted a few years before by Jennifer Lockett and Dawn Ashby, who work for Plymouth Marine Laboratory, Senior Impact Manager and Senior Comms Officer there, asking for some help in this area. I suggested, I probably don't know as much as I should do about impact strategies, but I know someone who does, and I put them in touch with Saskia. And then together, me and Saskia did some work to look at what was out there in terms of this landscape of other people creating strategies, what might be good practice. And then Saskia facilitated both Dawn and Jen to create their own strategy. But at the same time, Saskia and I were talking about this and saying, you know what, there's more we could do here. What about actually creating a sample, looking across multiple strategies in a really formal way, and writing a paper about this? And what more could we learn and what more could we share with the world by doing this? And so today's episode is about sharing some of the lessons from that research, but then making it real and grounded by interviewing Jen and Dawn to find out what that actually looks like and translates into on the ground. And in the paper, as you'll see, we've highlighted 4 exemplars of the kind of thing that we think works, and Plymouth Marine Laboratory is one of those 4 exemplars. So the way this is going to work, I'll start by discussing the paper with Saskia, then we'll move on to the case study. Saskia, do you want to tell us a little bit more about the genesis of this paper, this research that we did, and the work that you started with Jen and Dawn, and then we'll dive into some of the findings and some of the guidance that has emerged from this.
Yeah, I guess it really sort of emerged from beginning to think about what we might need to do and what we might need to look at in order to try and understand what a good impact strategy looked like. So in terms of thinking about what I was going to do or what we were going to do, working together with Jen and Dawn to look at, an impact strategy in their context. So the approach was to gather information about the organisation themselves, about where they were in terms of research and impact. And that had been, I guess, accelerated and helped by the fact that I'd already done a little bit of work reviewing some impact case studies for their NERC assessment. So I'd looked under the hood a bit in terms of the sort of research and impact that they were having. But then I wanted to take that information and put it into some sort of external context. What else was going on out there? What did good practice look like? And how could we interpret the conditions for Plymouth Marine Laboratory in terms of what else was there and what might be useful to them? And I think initially I looked at, gathered fairly randomly. I mean, my methodology in the initial stages was kind of, what could I find under a couple of Google searches, and that obviously was something that I really relied on you to improve the methodology of that as we went towards the paper. But that was originally gathering various different types of impact strategies and looking at what they said, how they were structured, what they included, what their approach was, and so on. And I think originally I sort of identified three different areas, and we really honed that down to two very clear different types of impact strategies as we developed the paper. But originally they were, and my language was very, very clumsy in those days. And again, that's something that we refined. But I identified one group of strategies which I described as doing better impact. So this is what these strategies were designed to do. We need to do better impact. How are we going to do that? And then there were some organisations who were actually working towards change objectives. So they had something particular in mind. They had a particular impact purpose, if you like, that they were moving towards. And then the third group that originally we looked at were those who maybe were working to a policymaker's agenda. So organisations like Policy Exchange, which where the research agenda was maybe driven by different groups than that from the sort of HI or broader research institutes. So I think that was the original hypothesis, if you like, that there are these different types of impact strategies. And I began to sort of unpick those very much in the context of what PML were doing, to think about, okay, which aspect of those are going to be useful for what we might do together. And actually, from the analysis, it looked like Plymouth Marine Laboratory was kind of between the do better impact and the work towards change objectives. It was a great time to be looking at this with them, because they were already doing quite a lot of profound work on their research strategy. And so, we were able to align those two things, which I think was a really, really valuable way of working. And that was the basis for developing an impact strategy that they very much owned and they very much created in the light of some of this information.
Great. So we distilled this down to two categories at the end. So your doing better impact group became enabling impact as a type of strategy, and the change objectives one and these quite specific policy type boundary organisations were combined together into achieving impact types of strategy. And to do this, we did a much more formal analysis. So 77 strategies from around the world. We looked at various different jurisdictions, so UK, Canada, Australia, Hong Kong, China, Denmark, and New Zealand. And we also looked at independent research institutes. And we did a combination of quantitative content analysis, but primarily a deep dive kind of qualitative thematic analysis to try and understand what is going on, can we generalize, and what are the different types, and trying to get these as distinctive as possible and with as little overlap as possible to make this useful for decision making. And so I'm going to ask if you can try and explain a little bit more about this. But I guess for listeners at this point, I want you to start asking yourself, well, I'm thinking about developing an impact strategy for my research group, my school, my faculty, my institution. What kind of strategy is the kind of strategy that I'm going to want most, which is going to be best suited to my context? And maybe we can talk about how you can then mix and match, as Jen and Dawn have done in theirs. But enabling versus achieving impact strategies, what are the key differences?
Well, I guess the key difference is about purpose. It's about what is the organisation's intention in developing these strategies, and those that are around achieving impact tend to be for maybe organisations that, as a remit, have a rather more focused. In terms of the research that we did, we identified that tended to be research institutes or maybe subsets of HEIs, so departments or research units within a particular institution that were more successful in developing the achieving impact strategies. And often they tended to be built around a theory of change or logic model. So they had these really useful frameworks that helped them understand how they were going to achieve these impact objectives. Whereas the enabling strategies, the organizations tend to have a much broader remit. And it was quite difficult for them, I think, to see easily how a theory of change might fit in terms of what impact you want to have. I mean, working with research organizations and their strategies, I think one of the things that organizations often find really difficult is not saying what they do well, but saying, okay, well, what are we not going to do? And obviously, if you're developing a strategy, you can't do everything. Otherwise, there's no strategy. But research organizations, I think, find it very difficult to do that, not because partly they have this hugely wide remit. Everybody has a role to play. Every department and discipline has a role to play. And so it's very, very difficult for them to say, okay, well, we're just going to focus on environmental impact, for example. And then, people who are working on something that is hard to see how it might relate to environment, they have a case to make as to why they need to be prioritized. And so I think there's very broad remit. The focus tends to be much more about, okay, how can we support researchers more broadly to achieve that impact? And so that's where you end up with the impact champions, impact funding, supporting impact activities right across the organisation.
Fantastic. So, am I right in thinking then that you could then, in an institutional setting, have, I guess, two ways of combining these? So, we'll look in a moment about how PML has combined elements of both in a single a single impact strategy. But equally, you could have something with a more nested structure. So you've got an institutional strategy, which is in this enabling impact mode, providing capacity building, training, funding, rewards, recognition, all of those kinds of things. And yet within that, you've got individual units that are much more mission focused, that will have a theory of change, a logic model, some very specific changes they want to see in the world with plans to get there.
Yeah, I think that would be a really sensible approach and a really productive approach. And I think just the process of thinking through that could be really valuable for different departments and different units within research organisations.
I think what we're discussing here is not something that I saw laid out explicitly in these institution-wide enabling impact strategies, although perhaps it was implicitly there. I was quite surprised at how few of these institution-wide strategies actually had an implementation plan. So lots of kind of high-level goals, but not a lot of detail in terms of how that is actually enacted. And I don't know whether we're just representing what we see on the ground or to what extent actually there was a plan. But I think that you do tend to see that combination quite often. What you don't see in my experience is anything systematic. So you'll see universities with a really good impact strategy, and I think King's College London is one of the exemplars that we provided. So have a look at that for an example of how to do that well. And then within that, I know there are certain centres and departments that have very well developed impact strategies, which are much more in that kind of achieving impact mode. But what I don't know is whether there are universities that are actually making the links between the two, and whether those more achieving impact strategies are just much more serendipitous. You've got someone with a passion, with an interest, with a few skills who does that in some certain parts of the universities, but not in others. And I wonder if there's a bit of a missing element here that actually as part of these institution-wide strategies, there could be more of an implementation plan that then takes it to that unit scale, that more mission-focused stuff.
That's certainly not something that I have been involved with or seen in the different organisations that I've worked with. I've kind of almost seen the opposite, where individual departments or groups have come to me and said, we would like to create a strategy of our own. Sometimes that is because they see initiatives going on centrally, and they kind of want to claim their own space. And so I've tended to work more from the bottom up in that sense. But obviously, a lot of these departments and organisations have also just created environment documents for the ref. So often, somebody will come to me and say, we want to talk about our strategy, or we want to develop a strategy. And I say, well, what have you already said that you do? And I don't think those documents are necessarily seen in the same space. But obviously, the information is often very relevant, and so there are different ways in which that can be brought together. But certainly, I think institutions thinking about nesting those strategies, from the overarching strategy down to smaller unit level, would be something that would be really productive.
Yeah, and then I guess the question then is, well, which way do you work this? Do you go from the bottom up or from the top down? Should it be about a institution-wide enabling impact strategy that then says, and every unit will have their own logic model or theory of change, or should it be the other way? Should we be enabling different units to come up with their own strategies in their own ways, and then looking at what emerges from that at an institutional level? And might that be a way of looking at what's in and what's out,
Yeah.
based on what you actually see emerging at the grassroots?
Yeah, I think that would be a very useful way of doing it. Not least because I think as those different impact pathways for the different units emerge, then the enabling strategy needs to meet the demands of those different pathways. So there have been some sort of disruptive elements, if you like. So if an institution was sort of left alone to completely develop an impact strategy, which was purely about developing impact, building on their research, meeting the aspirations and ambitions of their researchers, they would probably come up with something that was quite different from an environment in which they're expected to meet KEF objectives and they have a ref to. So I would love to see institutions building a ground up strategy and then saying, okay, what do we need to put in place to enable all those different departments to deliver on the sort of change objectives and the theory of change that they originally developed.
Mm. And so for international listeners, the acronyms we're referring to here, REF, Research Excellence Framework, which looks at research excellence and impact, and KEF, Knowledge Exchange Framework, which looks at everything else, knowledge exchange, in particular commercialization type indicators. So obviously this season of the podcast is looking at impact culture, and some of this work informed my chapter on capacity building in the impact culture book. And I wonder, what are the things that for you emerge most strongly from these strategies about how institutions and units were trying to use these strategic processes to kickstart a more healthy impact culture? What kind of mechanisms, ideas were coming out of these documents for you, Saskia?
Well, I think when most of the documents that we were looking at were written really before the research culture discussion had evolved and had developed in the way that it was. I mean, obviously there are issues of research culture that come out of this, but I don't think these documents were expressed in quite those terms, in the sense of identifying mechanisms to support a healthy research culture. And in fact, some of them may have been accidentally or inadvertently triggering an unhealthy research culture. Perhaps those that were driven much more by those extrinsic motivators. So, research strategies that were focused very much on achieving a certain number of 4-star case studies, for example, I think potentially has the risk of kind of derailing these healthy research culture approaches. But of course, I think, the idea of enabling impact broadly is, I think, something that can support the development of a healthy research culture when it's aligned with the more intrinsic motivations of researchers. Talking to researchers often have very clear ideas about how they would like their research to benefit society, and putting in place mechanisms to support that work, I think, is very helpful, whether it's providing expert professional services support, providing some funding, perhaps most controversially and importantly, looking at research workload allocation is probably the thing that comes out most strongly talking to researchers in this area. And there, I think there are inherent challenges and issues about that. As an impact practitioner, I feel very strongly that impact should be part of research work. It's integral to what you do in research, and yet. persuading researchers to allocate their research time to impact, they see as a huge risk, because still producing publications, bringing in grant income are the things that they feel are going to support and enhance their research careers. And so making that sort of change, ensuring that institutions can see what researchers are doing in this much riskier, much less kind of rewarded area of impact is going to be really, really important moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think this capacity building piece is crucially important, and giving everyone access to this, not just your research or impact stars who are going to be able to give you the return on investment from some exercise that is going to count a few beans for your institution. I think for me, one of the things that came out was this idea of co-producing impacts with our stakeholders, and organizations that were mentioning and creating boundary organizations as part of their strategies that were designed to sit between the university and a particular sector or range of organizations. And for me, the Plymouth Marine Laboratory example really develops it as a boundary organization. It might be worth discussing some of that with Jen and Dawn in a moment. But to conclude, I wonder, what are the key messages that you would give to people who are thinking, yeah, maybe I could develop an impact strategy. Maybe that would be a good idea. Maybe that could add some value. What are the key things that you would say to people in this space, things to think about?
I think there were three areas that have come over really, really fundamentally through this particular work, and through talking to other organisations about helping them think through their impact strategies. And the most important thing is the purpose. Why are you doing this? And so that is going to be so influential in terms of what the work looks like, and really having a clear understanding of what you want to achieve with this work is absolutely fundamental. Strong leadership, strong and committed leadership is I think really, really essential, and that's something that's come through in some of these other models, like the maturity model that Judy Bailey has developed in terms of the impact. I'm just
What
going
is
to
it?
pause.
Literacy model.
Literacy, the impact health, organizational impact health check.
Yes, that's the one. Yes, exactly.
Yes, the organizational impact, and that model really emphasizes the importance of leadership, and I would completely agree that having strong and clear leadership is fundamental to making this effective. And then something around coherence and communication, because there are a lot of different agendas and there are a lot of different initiatives in this area, and having a coherent approach which is informed by your purpose and delivered by strong leadership, I think reassures and makes life a lot easier for the researchers who are having to get to grips with this.
Absolutely, and this is one of the roles that Dawn and Jen have been playing, both to develop your own impact strategy in collaboration with all of your colleagues, but now implementing this and seeing what happens on the ground with this. So, Jen and Dawn, tell us a little bit more about you, your roles, and why you wanted to develop an impact strategy for Plymouth Marine Laboratory.
Thanks, Mike. So I'm Jenny Lockett. I'm a senior impact manager, but I started at PML 11 years ago as a project manager. So it's been a kind of transition into the impact world, largely because of working on the NERC evaluation, which is our equivalent to the university ref process and follows it very similarly. And we spent quite a few years developing case studies for that process, where we learned.
NERC is the Natural Environment Research Council, so a major environmental research funder in the UK. Yeah, carry on.
Sorry, yes, I hate using acronyms. And it was such a massive learning experience for us through that process, and really, changed our roles. I'll let Dawn introduce herself.
Yeah, I'm Dawn Ashby. I work in the communications department, and I started working with Jenny when she'd already done quite a bit of work on the REF case studies. And but we needed to really sort of up our game, and because the submission was coming up soon, so we ended up working together to develop these case studies. And I think we realised at the time that we were looking retrospectively so much for evidence that we really need in the future, if we're going to have to do this again, we really need to be more proactive in how we were going to record and actually generate impact. So that is why we came up with this desire to create an impact strategy, so we could really plan for this going forward into the future.
It was also, we were very conscious of trying to find out where everybody was within the organisation, because we were working with a few researchers around the case studies that were very good with impact, understood about non-academic impact agenda and had delivered impact, hence we were working with them to develop the case studies. But we really wanted to get the bigger picture of where other people in the organisation were. So we kind of started by doing some surveys and talking to people and trying to understand if others in the organisation really even knew what impact was, and that really gave us a good baseline of understanding where our colleagues were with it, and helped us to form this idea of knowing that we needed training and we needed more information going to our colleagues, and then we wanted to do that in a strategic way, and that obviously fed into the impact plan as well. So it was kind of both things pulling together of trying to help everyone to get to grips with the impact agenda, and making sure we were learning from this kind of retrospective process we'd had to do.
Great. So what I'm hearing is a clear sense of purpose. We need to do this, but also the recognition that you wanted to take an evidence-based and inclusive approach to this. So this survey then enabling you to find out what people's needs were, but also people's ideas. And I think this is the power of an impact strategy. There's lots of people with needs out there who could do more impact if they had the right environment, if they had the right support, resources, leadership, whatever it might be. You've got great ideas, and what you're then doing is taking all those needs, taking all those ideas and pulling them together into a coherent whole for which you can then make a business case, for which you can then coordinate, resource and make happen in a way that is actually going to work for people and deliver for those needs, put some of those great ideas into practice. So one of the things that's quite interesting about the model that you used was the relationship that you built with Saskia through this process. And this is a much more broadly generalizable thing. And so I'm interested to know how you came up with the idea for this, because you clearly had all the skills you needed to create an impact strategy. You had a whole lot of evidence. And yet you created this space and accountability with Saskia to enable you to then achieve something presumably better than you could have achieved without Saskia's help. And it's quite an interesting model for any kind of endeavor where, yeah, I think I know what I need to do, but let's use a coaching model to see if we can take this to a new level. So tell me where this idea for a coaching model came and this collaboration, how that worked and how that added value to what you were already planning to do.
I'm not sure at the beginning that we set out to have a coaching model, but that was what evolved and worked incredibly well for us. But at the beginning, it was about recognizing that we didn't know everything, and we could really value from an external perspective coming in. And one of the really key things Saskia did was come and meet with senior management here, and as well as getting to understand kind of our strategies and our documents, and obviously through our NERC case studies, understanding a bit about our science. She just came and talked to people, and they were very open with her about what they wanted from an impact strategy. And I don't think they would have responded to us necessarily in the same way, just because we are their colleagues and such like. So having that external perspective was really important. And what Saskia did an amazing of taking all of that information away and coming back to us with a presentation of what she thought we needed in terms of the framework very much. So it was around the theory of change approach and the impact plan delivering the enablers of that theory of change. And I think that was absolutely crucial, that framework that she gave us. was the foundation for then us putting the meat to those bones kind of thing, and really building on what we had there. So it was really helpful. It really helped us to get started, and then we kind of were able to go off a little bit on our own and run with it, and keep coming back and having regular meetings with Saskia and getting input on where we were and such like.
So tell me then how you managed to get the level of engagement that you needed from your colleagues and from your stakeholders as you then further developed, refined and finalised this.
So I must say our senior management have been brilliant with this. They've given us a lot of space to grow and understand the impact agenda, so that we can be seen as kind of the experts within our organisation and the people to come to about impact. And they've also really been supportive in wanting to change or embrace the impact culture across the whole organisation. So making sure that everybody had the opportunity to access impact training, and the messages that we were putting out about how important impact is, they've been supporting and kind of underpinning throughout with, the way that we've worked into different HR processes and bonus systems and promotion systems, that it needed that kind of all-encompassing approach, and senior management have been crucial for that. We liaised with lots of colleagues throughout the process of developing the impact plan, and once we had a kind of quite complete draft, we did several workshops, and so everyone within the organisation was invited to attend, and we did several small ones rather than, so everyone had the opportunity to talk, and we would present what we had and get feedback and input and ideas, so that we always kept kind of going back to everyone and seeing that this was going to be fit for purpose, that this made sense to them, and that they were going to be on board with it.
Yeah.
We also made a short video, didn't we? We sent out to all staff so they could watch it at their leisure. Those ones wouldn't come to a meeting or wouldn't engage in other ways. We managed to catch them through that as well. So we tried all sorts of different strategies for trying to engage with different types of people throughout the organisation.
Yeah, I love that. And you're practicing what you preach. I mean, here you are as a communications officer. And yeah, comms is going to be a big part of this strategy. So we need to walk the talk here and actually do some really good comms with our colleagues and get some real knowledge exchange happening as part of the process of developing this. So I wonder if you can share some of the ideas, the structures, the processes, stuff that's in your strategy that you're particularly proud of. As I said, we've put this out as an exemplar in our paper, one of 4 exemplars. I think there's a lot of really nice ideas, and it's all communicated really nicely as well. But what for you are some of the things that you think others might be able to draw on and learn from?
I mean, one of the big successes that we've delivered already, because the impact plan's been approved for around a year now, officially. I mean, we were kind of delivering it even while it was still in draft, but it's been officially kind of signed off by senior management for about around a year. And one of the big undertakings we did is training, in-house training. So that's been really excellent. I mean, Dawn and I had to develop our own skill set there in terms of becoming trainers. We knew the impact stuff very well and were very confident with it, but we also had to learn those skills of how to deliver it well. And we do a series of short courses here now, so half-day courses that are open to all of our staff and students to learn about impact planning, co-development, stakeholder mapping, impact monitoring and evaluation. So we do quite a range of training here, which has been really exciting, because the feedback from the staff has been excellent, and that's what's been, we've been continually doing surveys after we run anything and making sure we get feedback and learn as we go along. But generally, everybody's been so positive about it and just so pleased to have that opportunity to come along and learn these different skills. And we've also even started to do some of that externally, because where we're involved in different projects. So we did a training course for the UN Ocean Decade Programme, back in January, February time, the OARS programs for that one, and around ocean acidification. And we're going to do one next week with the UK Energy Research Council, theme 3. So it's quite nice, different areas that PML staff are involved in, because they're aware of our training. They're asking, so please come along and work with this wider group to train scientists. So that's really taken off, and that's one of the things I think we're particularly proud of. The other thing that we just did a few weeks ago is we held our first Research Impact Forum. So it's funny because I remember the exact moment that I came out with this to Saskia and Dawn when we were sat in one of the meeting rooms upstairs. And we have a Science Advisory Council that meets every year, and we present our science and we get this independent feedback from academics. And so my idea was very much, well, we need that, but in an impact focus. And so, all this time it got written in and we've developed it and honed it. And then April 6th, we actually delivered our first one, which was really exciting to see it through from that idea stage, really early on in the impact plan to now delivering it. And that was really exciting. We had a whole day event at PML and we had a lot of staff engage with it. And we presented a lot of impact areas that are developing with a real focus on impact. So we gave our scientists quite a hard task. If they weren't allowed to present the science, the technical detail of their science, they had to focus on the impact it was delivering, what they'd learned from that process so far, what the key kind of enablers of delivering to that point were, turning points, as well as challenges, so that other staff could learn from colleagues that are doing particularly well with impact routes. And crucially, we also had external participants come along. So we had an impact advisory panel, just like with our science council coming along. And we had lots of organisations, including DEFRA, the MMO, the IMO, the International Maritime Organisation. And who else was there? Wildlife Trust, Southwest Water, Environment Agency. We had a nice range of stakeholders come along. And Blue Marine Foundation. And that was really good because it was just them coming and listening about what we're doing and looking for links, looking how we can do more, how can we broaden the benefit of this work, how can we reach out to new groups. And we had an afternoon session where we all broke up into breakout groups and we did some challenge-led thinking workshops to co-develop new ideas with those stakeholders. So it's something I think we are particularly proud of because it was a little bit, something new, something quite novel, particularly within PML to have this real impact focus event. And it was really well. All the feedback so far from external and internal has been really positive, that they really got something from the event.
Fantastic. Your enthusiasm is infectious as you talk about this, and it is clear this is working. Dawn, I don't know if you want to add anything to this, and I want to then just get the reflections from Saskia to finish. But yeah, Dawn.
I would say our next challenges coming up will be keeping our relationships with these and Research Impact Panel, whatever they're called, yeah. And so we really want to develop ongoing relationships with these and continue to work with them to develop new projects and new impact generating activities and all sorts. So I think that's going to be our next challenge, is to really maintain these relationships and just keep working with these people.
Yeah, absolutely. So Saskia, this is your first chance since finishing that piece of work with Dawn and Jen some time ago to revisit this and hear actually how's it been going. You've got this. It's been approved. You've been applying it in practice. What are your reflections listening to where this is at now?
Yeah, it's been a real pleasure actually to go back and reflect, on the sort of pre-pandemic times when we started this project, and it's really fantastic to hear about some of the successes that are coming through. I mean, I think Jen and Dawn are a little bit. They may be playing down a little bit some of the challenges that they've had to face. I mean, there's been quite a lot of negotiation. I think their strategy of engaging, with a wide range of internal stakeholders, bringing the researchers along with them. I mean, that was something that was very, very necessary. And the communication strategy, I think, was very effective. Not only the video and the workshops, but there was also a 2-page version of the strategy that was developed, targeted specifically at researchers, showing researchers at the centre of this whole project, and how they were really essential to the workings of the whole thing, how it was driven by their needs, really. And so, it's absolutely brilliant to hear about some of the successes, and even if they've taken a long time to come to fruition for various different reasons, it sounds like things are developing very successfully.
Yeah, and this is a long-term thing. I think you can't just decide to sit down and put pen to paper and write an impact strategy. And I think that this exemplifies the amount of hard work and commitment and perseverance that is required, and yet also the rewards of doing that, and doing that in a really inclusive way, as you have done. Now, if you want to find out more about this, I'll put into the show notes the web link for the paper that Saskia and I and our colleagues have got. This is a preprint, so it's currently under review in the journal Research for All, but you can read that preprint at www.fasttrackimpact.com/impact strategies, one word. Also in the show notes is a link to a training session. So I'm going to be back with Saskia, Dawn and Jen on the 27th of June. And we're going to be doing a much more in-depth session on this, really thinking through the tools, the things you need to think about if you want to create an impact strategy. So if you're interested in taking that on further and want to come to a free workshop with us based on the evidence from this paper, it's on the 27th of June, and I'll put a link for you to book that in the show notes. Just remains for me to say thank you, Saskia, thank you, Jen and Dawn, for your input to today's episode, but more deeply than that, the conversations that have been taking place over these last 3 years, and it is that long that it has taken, that have led to a point now where we all collectively have so much clearer an idea of what makes a good, effective impact strategy, and far from just being in theory and in a paper, in reality, at least in your impact strategy. So thank you for your inputs, and do enjoy reading the paper and trying to put this stuff into practice yourself.